The government says you need 72 hours of food stored. 72 hours. 3 days. Hurricane Katrina displaced people for an average of 3 weeks. After Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, the average household lost power for 84 days. During the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022, supply chain disruptions in affected regions stretched for months with no clear endpoint. And the Siege of Sarajevo, the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare history, lasted 1,425 days. 72 hours is not preparedness. It is a false sense of it. Right now, stockpile these 11 foods if WW3 starts, because they are the foods that outlast the system when the system stops working. And I am not talking about rice and canned beans. I am talking about 11 specific items that most people walk past every single week in the grocery store, that cost less than $75 total to put together, and that cover not just caloric survival but protein, minerals, hydration, hormonal function, and cognitive performance. Because history does not show us that people collapse from immediate starvation. History shows us that people collapse gradually, from what their body stops receiving weeks into a crisis. The energy runs out first, then the protein, then the minerals, then clarity, then the body's ability to repair itself. And by the time you feel the effects, the window to fix it has already closed. Stay until the end of this list, because the item at number 2 is one that most people already own, but have completely miscalculated. And when I tell you why, it's going to change how you think about hydration in a crisis. Let's count down. Item 11. Potato flakes. The 7-minute meal that could save your life. Most survival food lists talk about calories. Fewer of them talk about the fuel it takes to access those calories. Think about that for a moment. You have dried beans. You have lentils. You have rice. But cooking dried beans can take 90 minutes of sustained heat. Rice needs at least 20 minutes of boiling water. And in a crisis where electricity is down, where natural gas lines are disrupted, where firewood is limited, a real measurable depleting cost. That is exactly why potato flakes belong at the foundation of any serious stockpile. During World War II, military ration engineers spent years solving one specific problem: how to provide adequate calories with minimum cooking time and minimum fuel. Instant potato formulations were developed precisely for this context. Not as comfort food, as survival engineering. What makes potato flakes work is structural simplicity. The moisture has been almost completely removed during processing, which means there is no environment for microorganisms to colonize. There are no oils that can oxidize and go rancid. You are essentially holding dehydrated carbohydrate in a form that only needs heat and water to become food. Caloric density sits at approximately 350 calories per 100 grams. A standard single serving of about 30 grams provides roughly 100 calories and a meaningful amount of potassium, which becomes valuable when electrolytes are depleted. Here is what most people get wrong with potato flakes. They buy them, put the open bag in a cupboard, and assume they are good indefinitely. They are not. The moment the original packaging is opened and ambient humidity enters, you have started a clock. The correct approach is to transfer potato flakes into a sealed mylar bag, with an oxygen absorber inside. Do that, and the shelf life extends to somewhere between 25 and 30 years. That is not a food. That is infrastructure. On a day when the body is exhausted, when mental fatigue makes cooking feel impossible, potato flakes are what appear in 7 minutes with almost no fuel, no preparation, and no complexity. In a prolonged crisis, that matters more than any elaborate meal plan. But calories alone will not keep your body functioning the way you need it to. The next item is something that ancient armies were literally paid with, and its absence creates a collapse so slow and invisible, you might not recognize it until it is too late. Item 10. Iodized salt, the mineral that kept armies alive. The word salary comes from the Latin word salarium. Roman soldiers were sometimes partially compensated in salt, because salt was that essential, that irreplaceable, that strategic. It preserved food. It maintained soldiers' health. It was currency, medicine, and logistics all at once. We have not changed as much as we think. Most people understand that salt is necessary for survival. What most people do not understand is that the type of salt they are storing matters enormously, and that most common alternatives, sea salt, Himalayan pink salt, kosher salt, do not reliably provide iodine in meaningful amounts. Iodine is the mineral your thyroid uses to produce T3 and T4 hormones, the hormones that regulate your metabolic rate, your core body temperature, your brain function. When iodine intake drops significantly, the thyroid begins to slow. You do not feel it as hunger. You feel it as fatigue, cold intolerance, brain fog, depression, slower healing. During World War I, troops stationed in landlocked regions, cut off from coastal food sources, experienced epidemic rates of goiter, a visible swelling of the thyroid caused by iodine deficiency. Military medical records from that era document the widespread cognitive and physical effects on troop performance. It was one of the drivers behind the post-war iodization of table salt in the United States and Europe. Here is a storage detail that almost no prepper guide mentions. The original cardboard or plastic packaging that table salt comes in allows moisture to slowly enter over time. Moisture does not destroy salt. Salt is essentially immortal. But moisture can accelerate the degradation of the potassium iodate or potassium iodide used to iodize the salt. Storing iodized salt in a sealed glass jar protects the iodine content far more effectively than leaving it in the original packaging. Salt also doubles as a preservation medium. A small amount of salt rubbed into meat or vegetables slows bacterial growth significantly, extending the edible life of fresh food by days to weeks when refrigeration is unavailable. And when water is lost through sweat or exertion, a pinch of salt dissolved in clean water helps maintain electrolyte balance, slowing the onset of dehydration-driven exhaustion. Iodized salt does not expire. Stored correctly, it is one of the genuinely timeless items on this list. There is a second function of iodized salt in a crisis that we will come back to shortly. But first, salt keeps your body's hormonal system functional. The next item keeps your body's structural proteins intact. And without that, everything else eventually fails. Item 9. Egg powder, the protein that outlasts the grid. The United States military began using powdered eggs in 1917. Over 100 years of field-tested, grid-independent protein supply. That is not a coincidence. That is the result of a century of solving exactly the problem you are trying to solve. Fresh eggs last roughly 2 to 3 weeks at room temperature, less in heat. Without refrigeration in a crisis, your protein window closes fast. Meat spoils within days. Fresh dairy depends entirely on unbroken supply chains. The body does not slow down its protein requirements just because the crisis makes protein harder to find. What most people get wrong when they think about protein in their stockpile is focusing only on whether they have a protein source, not on whether that source provides a complete amino acid profile. Beans and rice, the most common prepper protein plan, provide incomplete proteins on their own. They work in combination, but the combination requires more cooking time and more fuel. Here is a distinction that matters more than most people realize. Whole egg powder, including the yolk, is substantially more valuable for crisis use than egg white powder alone. The fat in the yolk contains fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. It also provides lecithin, which supports cell membrane integrity. Stripping the yolk to make a lower-calorie product removes exactly the components you need most when your diet is already compromised. When sealed in an airtight container away from heat and moisture, whole egg powder has a documented shelf life of 5 to 10 years. 1 tablespoon of reconstituted egg powder delivers roughly 6 grams of complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids present. In a crisis that lasts weeks, the body can function on carbohydrates alone for a short time. But without complete protein, muscle recovery slows. Immune function degrades. The body begins to cannibalize its own tissue for the amino acids it cannot find elsewhere. That is not starvation in the traditional sense. It is a slower, quieter breakdown that looks like fatigue and weakness long before it looks like hunger. Protein helps you recover physically. But here is where most survival lists stop short of something critical, and it is something the next item addresses directly. Every item we have covered so far addresses something the body loses physically. But there is a second type of collapse that historical crisis documentation records far more than mainstream preparedness content acknowledges. When the Dutch hunger winter of 1944 to 1945 was studied decades later, researchers found that survivors' long-term outcomes correlated not just with caloric intake. The mind breaks before the body, and when it does, survival decisions deteriorate. The next item is the one that guards against that. Item 8. Nutritional yeast, the brain's emergency fuel. When researchers studied the recovery of Allied prisoners of war after World War II, they found that B vitamin repletion was as critical to returning cognitive function as caloric restoration. Soldiers who had adequate calories but depleted B vitamins showed symptoms that looked strikingly like neurological trauma: poor concentration, emotional dysregulation, fragmented memory, slower processing speed. More recent research has identified that severe B12 deficiency can mimic PTSD in its symptom profile: anxiety, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, and cognitive fragmentation. In a high-stress crisis environment, those symptoms are easy to attribute to the stress itself. The actual nutritional cause goes untreated. The problem with depending on multivitamin supplements to cover this gap is that vitamin pills have a vulnerability that dry food form vitamins do not. Heat, light, and moisture degrade the bioavailability of synthetic B vitamins in pill form significantly faster than the expiration date suggests. A multivitamin stored in a garage through a summer is not delivering its labeled potency by the time you need it. Nutritional yeast in sealed dry form does not have this problem. The B vitamins exist in a stable food form matrix that preserves far better under imperfect storage conditions. 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast per day provides approximately 100% of the recommended daily allowance of B12, along with substantial B1, B2, B3, and B6. It also provides a modest amount of protein, around 8 grams per 2 tablespoons, and has a light, savory, cheese-like flavor. In dry sealed form, nutritional yeast lasts 2 or more years without refrigeration. It requires no cooking, no preparation, and no fuel. Your body needs B vitamins to think. Your entire hormonal system needs what is coming next, and it weighs almost nothing. Item 7. Dried seaweed, the weightless pharmacy. A single sheet of nori, the thin, dry seaweed used to wrap sushi, contains more iodine than most Western adults consume in an entire day from their regular diet. But that is almost a secondary benefit. What makes dried seaweed genuinely irreplaceable in a long-term stockpile is the breadth of trace minerals it provides simultaneously. Selenium, needed for thyroid hormone conversion and antioxidant function. Magnesium, critical for over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, including muscle contraction and nervous system regulation. Calcium, typically available from dairy that disappears in a crisis. Iron, which supports oxygen transport in the blood. No other item on this list delivers that mineral breadth in such a lightweight, fuel-free, long shelf-life format. During World War II, Japanese civilian populations endured extraordinary food rationing. Nutritional historians who have studied this period note that continued access to dried seaweed as part of the civilian ration. While the overall caloric situation was dire, thyroid-related deficiency conditions were notably less prevalent in coastal populations with seaweed access than in inland populations without it. Vacuum-sealed dried seaweed lasts 2 or more years. It requires zero preparation. It can be eaten dry as a mineral supplement snack, crumbled into soups, or rehydrated in water and used as a vegetable substitute. The key storage detail: once opened, keep dried seaweed in an airtight container away from humidity. Humidity is the only thing that will degrade it. Without it, seaweed is remarkably durable. Minerals keep your hormones stable. The next item keeps your structural foundation intact: bones, joints, connective tissue, the elements that begin to fail silently when a crisis extends from weeks into months. Item 6. Bone broth powder, the long game supplement. The Siege of Sarajevo lasted from April 1992 to February 1996, 1,425 consecutive days. The longest siege of a capital city in the history of modern warfare. Residents who endured it reported something that shorter crises do not produce. It was not acute suffering. It was the slow erosion of physical resilience. Joints that stopped recovering. Digestion that became unreliable. A body that continued moving, but no longer repaired itself at the pace that sustained functionality required. Bone broth powder addresses the layer of nutrition that becomes critical specifically in long-duration crises. Not energy, not protein in the traditional muscle-building sense. Structural protein. When you consume bone broth powder, you are primarily receiving glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline, the 3 amino acids that your body uses to synthesize collagen and repair connective tissue. Gut lining, joint cartilage, tendon integrity, skin elasticity. These structures degrade under chronic physical stress and a monotonous diet. And unlike muscle protein, They do not have a fast metabolic feedback mechanism telling you they are depleted. You simply notice weeks later that joints ache without injury, that the gut is sensitive without explanation. That recovery takes longer than it should. Each serving of bone broth powder provides approximately 10 grams of collagen peptides. In warm water, it dissolves in under 60 seconds, the lowest fuel cost of any meaningful protein source on this list. Sealed in its original container, it lasts 2 to 5 years without refrigeration. Here is what most people get wrong. They treat bone broth as a comfort food or a cold weather beverage. It is a structural supplement. The difference in framing changes when and how consistently you use it. Before we go further, the item coming up at number 2 is one that most people already have in their pantry. But almost everyone has miscalculated it. Keep watching. We have reached the halfway point of this list, and I want to return to something. The 72-hour emergency guideline exists because it is the minimum threshold for most acute localized disasters. But WW3, regional conflict, and large-scale infrastructure failure. Hurricane Katrina, average displacement, 3 weeks. Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, average power outage, 84 days. Ukraine supply chain disruptions in 2022 months. The foods we are covering are not for 72 hours. They are for the duration that history actually shows crises last. Item 5. Ghee. The fat that functions as fuel. Before refrigeration existed, cultures in South Asia solved a problem that modern preppers have largely forgotten. How do you preserve fat, one of the most calorie-dense substances in any diet, without electricity, without cooling? The answer was ghee. Clarified butter with the water and milk solids removed, leaving behind pure butterfat in a stable, shelf-ready form. Ancient Indian military logistics used ghee not only as a food but as a preservation medium. Meats, spices, and herbs packed in ghee survived months without refrigeration, making it a strategic supply chain asset in prolonged campaigns. Here is why fat matters in a survival context beyond just calories. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble, meaning the body cannot absorb them without dietary fat present. A crisis diet built on grains and dried vegetables, with no fat source, is nutritionally less effective than it looks on paper. Those vitamins exist in your stored foods, but without fat, they pass through the body largely unused. Ghee is pure fat, with no water content to enable bacterial growth and no milk solids to go rancid. Vegetable oils, by comparison, begin oxidizing within 1 to 2 years. Ghee, properly sealed in a dark glass jar with an oxygen absorber, remains stable at room temperature for 2 to 5 years. Caloric density is where ghee becomes truly strategic for anyone with limited storage space. 100 grams of ghee contains approximately 900 calories. 100 grams of lentils contains approximately 116 calories. When your storage space is measured in cubic feet, ghee is the most efficient calorie density available per unit of volume. 1 tablespoon, about 14 grams, provides 120 calories of slow-burning energy. Its smoke point of 485 degrees Fahrenheit makes it safe on any emergency heat source, from a gas burner to an open fire, without producing harmful oxidation byproducts that damaged oils can create. Store in dark glass. Do not refrigerate after opening. Temperature fluctuation accelerates the rancidity you are trying to avoid. Keep it at consistent room temperature in a cool location. Ghee fuels you. The next item makes sure your body actually absorbs everything you are giving it, because eating and absorbing are not the same thing, and in a resource-constrained crisis that gap can cost you more than you think. Item 4. Canned coconut milk. The absorption multiplier here is a nutritional reality that almost every prepper guide skips entirely. If you build a survival stockpile of vegetables, grains, and dried foods but include no stable fat source, a significant portion of the micronutrients in those foods will pass through your body without being absorbed. Vitamins A, D, E, and K require dietary fat to cross from the gut into the bloodstream. Without it, the food is present but the nutrition is not fully utilized. Canned coconut milk is the only ready-to-use, zero-preparation, refrigeration-free fat source on this list that can be consumed immediately. During the Pacific theater of World War II, island populations in the Pacific faced severe supply disruptions as military operations reshaped trade and transportation. Nutritional researchers who have studied the health outcomes of these populations note that the continued presence of coconut as a dietary staple provided both caloric density and fat-soluble vitamin activation support during periods of acute shortage. The fat in coconut milk is primarily composed of medium-chain triglycerides, or MCTs. Unlike long-chain fats that require more complex digestion, MCTs are absorbed directly into the portal bloodstream and converted to energy rapidly. This makes coconut milk a particularly fast-acting energy source in addition to its vitamin absorption role. A practical storage tip: sealed cans of full-fat coconut milk last 2 to 5 years. When you open a can, you may find that the coconut cream has separated and solidified at the top, with liquid at the bottom. This is not spoilage. This is the natural separation of fat. The solid cream is actually more concentrated and more calorically dense. Shake the sealed can if it sounds liquid throughout. It is fully homogenized. If you can hear a solid mass, it has separated but is completely fine. Coconut milk helps your body make full use of everything else you have stored. The next item addresses something that almost no prepper guide acknowledges: the role of morale and sensory experience in sustained survival. Every item so far has addressed physical function. But research into long-duration survival situations, including the Dutch hunger winter of 1944 to 1945, the Siege of Leningrad, and modern refugee crisis psychology, consistently identifies something that no calorie count captures. Morale collapse precedes physical collapse. When meals become purely mechanical, the same texture, the same color, the same absence of flavor, the psychological cost compounds. People begin skipping meals not from lack of food but from loss of will to eat. The next item exists specifically to prevent that. Item 3. Dried mushrooms. The morale food. During the Siege of Leningrad from 1941 to 1944, Soviet survival manuals and civilian guidance documents specifically included dried mushrooms as a resource. The acknowledgement that food needed to provide psychological as well as caloric sustenance was, remarkably, built into the guidance itself. Dried mushrooms do 3 things simultaneously that no other single item on this list does. First, they provide genuine nutritional value. Dried shiitake mushrooms contain ergothioneine, a unique antioxidant that the human body cannot synthesize on its own. They also contain vitamin D2, one of the very few plant-based sources of vitamin D activity, which becomes critical. 10 grams of dried shiitake provide approximately 1.2 micrograms of vitamin D2. Second, they reconstitute with nothing but water, no heat required. Soak them in cold water for 20 to 30 minutes, and they return to a texture that approximates fresh mushroom. Cold water soaking also preserves more heat-sensitive nutrients than hot water reconstitution. Critically, the water used to soak dried mushrooms becomes a rich, savory broth. Do not discard it. That liquid contains soluble minerals, amino acids, and flavor compounds that transform a bland grain dish into something that tastes. Third, and most important for the long game, they taste like something. They have texture. They have umami. They make a pot of rice or a serving of lentils feel like food rather than fuel. In a prolonged crisis, the body needs calories. The mind needs the experience of a meal. Dried mushrooms are one of the few items that serve both functions simultaneously without requiring refrigeration, significant preparation, or substantial fuel. Sealed in an airtight container, they last 1 to 3 years. That is long enough to carry you through almost any foreseeable crisis duration. Mushrooms restore the feeling of eating. What comes next restores the body's ability to hold on to the water it has, and in a resource-limited crisis, that becomes a crisis within a crisis faster than most people expect. Item 2. Chia seeds, the hydration multiplier. This is the item I mentioned at the start. The one most people already have. The one almost everyone has miscalculated. Aztec warriors reportedly carried chia seeds as their primary endurance food during long campaigns, a single tablespoon reportedly sustaining a warrior through a full day of marching. Whether or not that specific claim is precisely documented, the underlying mechanism is real and well studied. When chia seeds are soaked in liquid, they form a hydrogel, a thick gel-like coating around each seed. This gel does not just change texture. It fundamentally alters how the body processes both the food and the liquid it is consumed with. The gel slows gastric emptying, which means food stays in the stomach longer, the sense of satiety extends, and critically, water is released into the body's systems more gradually rather than all at once. In practice, this means that a cup of water consumed with 2 tablespoons of chia seeds provides meaningfully more effective hydration than a cup of water consumed alone. The body extracts more from each unit of liquid. Here is the math, and this is the part that should change how you think about water storage in a crisis. If Chia gel allows a body to retain 15 to 20% more effective hydration per unit of water consumed, a family of 4 with 10 gallons of stored water is functionally operating as though they have between 11.5 and 12 gallons. Over a 30-day crisis, that difference can represent multiple days of survival margin. 2 tablespoons of chia seeds provide 10 grams of fiber, 5 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. They require no cooking, no fuel, and no preparation beyond soaking. Sealed, they last 4 to 5 years. The correct use in a crisis is simple. 2 tablespoons in 1 cup of water. Wait 20 minutes. The gel that forms can be consumed directly, added to any meal, or dissolved into any beverage, including lightly salted water. In severe dehydration scenarios, the hydrogel can be used to slow fluid loss from the gut, making whatever water you do have more biologically effective. Chia seeds extend your water supply without adding a single drop. The final item on this list does something that nothing else here can do. It helps the body repair itself after the damage has already been done. Item 1. Gelatin, the recovery agent. During World War I, military surgeons in field hospitals noticed a pattern. Soldiers recovering from wounds and physical trauma, who received gelatin-supplemented rations, showed measurably faster connective tissue recovery than those on standard rations alone. It was one of the earliest documented field-tested observations of collagen precursor supplementation, not in a laboratory. A century later, the underlying science has been substantially validated. Gelatin is essentially pure collagen protein in a shelf-stable, dry form. When consumed, it provides glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline, the exact amino acids the body uses to build and repair joint cartilage, gut lining, tendon tissue, and skin integrity. Collagen makes up approximately 30% of the total protein content in the human body. Under chronic physical stress, the kind that extended crisis conditions produce, the body's demand for collagen precursors outpaces what a standard diet can provide, especially a monotonous survival diet with no fresh animal protein. But here is the angle that no mainstream prepper content has caught up with yet, because the research is recent. Studies conducted between 2020 and 2023 have identified that glycine, the primary amino acid in gelatin, specifically, glycine supplementation before sleep, has been shown to reduce core body temperature during sleep onset, improve sleep efficiency, and reduce cortisol reactivity. In a crisis environment characterized by chronic stress, poor sleep, and elevated cortisol, all of which are documented in any prolonged displacement or conflict scenario, cortisol suppression means better immune function, better cognitive performance, better emotional regulation, and faster physical recovery. Gelatin is not just rebuilding your joints. It is downregulating the stress response that is quietly degrading every other system in your body. Unflavored gelatin powder in sealed packets is one of the few items on this list that genuinely approaches the never expire claim in the title. Stored dry and sealed, gelatin has an indefinite shelf life. There is no known degradation mechanism under proper dry storage conditions. It dissolves completely in warm liquid, is invisible when mixed, and adds no flavor. 1 tablespoon in your morning broth, your evening soup, or any warm liquid delivers 6 grams of structural protein with 23 calories and no additional macronutrient load. Energy helps you work today. Protein helps you recover over the next few days. Gelatin helps your body maintain the structural integrity that determines whether you can still function in month 3, when the acute phase is over but the body's damage account comes due. That is the item most prepper lists leave off entirely. Let's step back and look at what these 11 items actually build together. Potato flakes give you fast, fuel-efficient carbohydrate energy. Iodized salt maintains your hormonal system and extends the shelf life of everything around it. Egg powder provides complete protein without refrigeration. Nutritional yeast keeps your cognitive function intact when B vitamins decline. Dried seaweed delivers a breadth of trace minerals that no single supplement can replicate. Bone broth powder rebuilds the structural connective tissue that chronic stress erodes. Ghee provides the highest caloric density per unit of storage space of anything on this list. Canned coconut milk ensures your body actually absorbs the nutrients in everything else you've stored. Dried mushrooms restore the psychological experience of a real meal. Chia seeds extend your effective water supply without adding volume. And gelatin repairs the body at the structural level while simultaneously reducing the stress hormone cascade that degrades everything else. This is not a list. It is a system. Each item covers a gap that the others do not. And the total cost to assemble a meaningful quantity of all 11, enough to meaningfully supplement meals for one person for 30 days, is under $75 at most major grocery stores and online retailers. Most of these items are not in specialty survival shops. They are in your regular grocery store right now. The preparation conversation is not about fear. It is about the recognition that stability is not a permanent condition. History demonstrates this with every decade that passes. The people who navigate prolonged crises most effectively are not the ones with the most food. They are the ones whose food does not run out of value before the crisis runs out of duration. You do not have to be a prepper to take this seriously. You just have to understand that 72 hours is not a plan. It is a starting point. Right now, before you close this video, I want you to do one thing. Drop the number of items on this list that you already have stored in your home. Just type the number in the comments. That is it. One number. Let us see where most people actually are. If this video gave you something useful, share it with someone who needs to see it. Not because the world is ending, but because preparation is a form of care. For yourself, for your family, for the people you are responsible for. And if you want to go deeper, the next video is going to cover the 5 most common mistakes people make when storing these exact foods. Mistakes that can take a food with a 10-year shelf life and reduce it to 18 months without you ever knowing anything went wrong. Oxygen absorbers used incorrectly. Temperature cycling that no one warns you about. Container choices that silently compromise everything inside. That video is coming soon. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it, because the storage mistakes video may be more important than the list itself. The foods exist.